Hello, welcome to my channel. What if Naruto Reborn? In High School DXD with Power of Destruction Part 2. A monster? No, a demon. That's what went through everyone's mind as they witnessed the one-sided slaughter that was happening before them. How was this possible? He was just one man, for crying out loud. Yet, despite that, he was lowering their numbers, one by one. Some shuddered at the smile he wore, a smile that promised certain death that would come for them, should they attempt to oppose them or not. Even now, the man's blonde hair was painted red from the blood of their comrades. The man's eyes, which started of blue much like a cloudless sky, were nothing more than a pair of crimson orbs that looked at them like they were nothing more than mere annoyances. Preposterous. They, children of God himself, looked at as they were nothing. Scowling, dozens of magic circles formed in the air which began shooting repeated light spears at the demon in human skin. The blonde looked amused at their attempt and allowed their attacks to get closer and closer before he, with a snap of his fingers, summoned a massive wall of destructive fire that reached high into the sky. Their light spears were reduced to nothing upon coming in contact with those mutated flames, much to their dismay, as they were the go-to attack when it came to dealing with those from the underworld. Behind the wall of flames, Naruto gave a smirk before he disappeared. Slowly but surely the flames died down. Several light spears were formed in preparation only for them to see no one there. It was empty. The only sign he was ever there was the scorched ground before them. Grrk. Gurgling sounds reached their ears, prompting them to turn around only to see their target standing there. His back facing him, unconcerned that they might strike him down. Smirking arrogantly, they got ready to attack him once more, only for their eyes to widen as one by one they fell to their knees. Each of them sporting a hole where their heart used to be. Naruto clicked his tongue in annoyance as he could feel their life force fade away. One would be surprised if they were to see the look he was sporting at this exact moment. Even with himself covered in blood of those he had slain, he still was not satisfied. He had hoped that this war would provide him with opponents which he could test himself again, to finally find out what his limits are. But instead all he got were a few dozen grunts that were not even worth the effort he had put in. They were weak, detestable, just mere annoyances who stood in the way of the true important ones that were fighting in this war. But alas, he casually shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps if he would kill more and more of them, someone more powerful would appear. With that, a pair of wings made of flames formed on his back as he kicked off, leaving behind a field littered with corpses belonging to one of heaven's many battalions that were eradicated by a single man. Mere minutes after his departure, a small group of devils arrived. Along with them was Sirzechs, who had quickly tried to catch up to her friend after he had left them all behind. "Dear Lucifer, what happened here?" she heard one of the men speak as they looked around at the scattered body parts that lay around. The field was painted red with the exception of the large scorch mark that stood out in the middle. Despite them being devils, most weren't used to seeing something like this before them. It looked like a one-sided slaughter had happened against an opponent who simply outclassed them. "Naruto happened," she spoke up, getting their attention. "Naruto, you mean the son of Lord Bale?" She nodded. Damn, never would have expected that from a kid like him. He did look quite excitement at the prospect of fighting, but still, to single-handedly kill of an entire force of angels. He looked around and noticed the others of the group were looking at the dozens of angels who each sported an empty hole in their chest. Not too far away, several hearts could be seen laying there on the ground, showing that they were removed with almost surgical precision. Sirzechs said nothing. Her thoughts were with her friend whom she was concerned about. She was sure everyone had felt the malicious energy rolling off of him seconds before he shot off. It was pure evil. Yes, they were devils and their energy was dark, but what she had felt coming from him was on a whole different level of dark. Just being close to him made you tremble, as you could feel his desire to kill, maim and destroy whoever got in his way. It was a big difference compared to he usually was, which was more carefree with a welcoming aura surrounding him, prompting others to want to speak or be around him. What she and others had felt made them want to run away and hide from him in fear of standing in his way. So potent the aura was that others had went a different location as to not get in his way. After giving Naruto's work one last look over, the group set off hoping to find him or anyone else. Meanwhile, Naruto was flying through the sky without a rush. His previous encounter with what he assumed were mere scouts had left a bad taste in his mouth, which he tried to get rid of by taking his time traveling to where he could feel a lot of energy signatures belonging to both angels and devils. Most likely a big battle was happening and he looked forward to taking part. His speculations turned out to be true, as not long thereafter he came upon the sight of a massive battle going on. What surprised him, however, were the black, feathery wings he could see. Wings that belonged to neither angel or devils but fallen. He was curious what they were doing here, as this war had nothing to do with them as far as he knew, at least. It was between heaven and hell. Not to mention that their numbers were the lowest of the three factions, which made him question what Azazel was thinking. As he looked at the battlefield, he spotted the long crimson hair belonging to his friend and slowly flew towards him. As he lowered himself, he summoned a massive wall of fire stretching for what seemed to be miles, along with it being several hundred feet high, causing those that were high up in the sky to quickly move back. Yo, Naruto greeted his friend who had turned around to face him the moment the flames were summoned. Oh Naruto, it seems you have been busy. Sirzechs greeted him as he noticed his blood-covered hair and hands. Yeah, I ran into some scouts and quickly got rid of them. They were disappointing really, didn't even put on a good fight. He ran his hand through his hair, unbothered by the blood in it. You killed an entire battalion. He shrugged. Yeah, though they were really weak. Like it actually upset me how pathetic they were. He chuckled. Didn't even realize it when I removed their hearts from their chest. He clenched his bloody fist. Sirzechs chuckled nervously upon hearing that. By the way, what is up with those fallen? Why are they here? I mean, last time I checked, this has nothing to do with them. I'm not sure of that myself. Anyway, can you get rid of those flames of yours? It's getting quite hot in here and I'm sure others will agree. Sirzechs gestured behind him at those who kept the distance from the heat. Rolling his eyes, he snapped his fingers, allowing the flames to die down till they were just flickering embers. I'm gonna meet Azazel. Perhaps he can provide an actual challenge instead of the rest of the fodder. Without waiting for a reply, he jumped up, his wings once more coming into existence as he headed towards the only 12-winged fallen alive. Ho, so Naruto Bale himself comes to face me, a man said as he floated in midair, suspended by his 12 pitch black wings that came out of his back. He looked to be in his early 20s with black hair which had blonde bangs and violet eyes like so many other fallen. Yes, I hope you can prove to be an actual challenge unlike those others. Naruto spoke arrogantly, his eyes half-lidded as if the man was not even a threat. Something that wasn't true, as he could feel the power the man had, which was more than any other fallen he had encountered. Probably what made him the leader of their faction. Instead of getting annoyed by his arrogance, Azazel merely smirked at his younger opponent. He had heard all sorts of information about the young Bale heir. From his unique bloodline to his enormous magic power, which was said to have already surpassed some of the strongest beings. He, Sirzechs and Ajuka were said to be some of the major players of the war on the devil's side. Someone who should be eliminated if the opportunity presents itself, as some had feared what will become of them when they would get older. However, where some would find themselves afraid after sensing the younger male's massive magic reserves, Azazel only found himself shaking in excitement. Apparently the boy was quite a monster when it came to fighting, a true devil who enjoys the thrill of a fight. The fact that he was already covered in blood only seemed to back up those reports. So I guess you wish to fight, huh? Azazel said as he released his killing intent on the younger boy, who smiled viciously in response. Yes, let's see if you truly are worthy of your wings. He released his own aura and bloodlust that washed over the battlefield. Even Azazel was caught off guard at the potency of his aura, which surpassed his own, before he quickly collected himself and got ready. Closing his eyes, Naruto stopped releasing his killing intent before opening them, showing a deadly glint mixed with excitement of what was about to happen. As if there was some unseen signal, both men shot towards another, meeting the other in the middle, fist against fist. After staying locked like that for longer than comfortable, they disengaged before going back on the offense. Their limbs were a blur as they dealt, but also took damage. Naruto felt a fist impact against his cheek and allowed momentum to turn him around before lashing out with a kick which was blocked. Despite blocking, Azazel was set several feet back as he clenched his fist from how hard he had kicked him. It was impressive for someone his age, Azazel mused. He was several millennia old, yet here was a boy barely a century old matching him blow for blow. Looking at his opponent, Azazel saw him smirk. The wounds he had dealt had already been healed and he cursed the boy's phoenix blood. The only sign he had managed to get a hit in was the few drops of blood that ran down his chin. You're good, Naruto yelled. I can't remember the last time someone has made me bleed. He clenched his fist and Azazel could see crimson flames flickering in existence. But let's take this up a notch, shall we? He didn't wait for a reply as several dozen magic circles formed behind him, each shooting a concentrated burst of destruction towards Azazel, who quickly formed several magic circles himself and countered by meeting his attack with light spears of his own. Naruto clicked his tongue as he saw his attack being cancelled out by Azazel's. Had it been Sirzechs that used his attack, Naruto had no doubts he would have won the struggle for power, as Sirzechs' power of destruction was more potent than his. It was something he had found out when they had sparred. Due to his unique bloodline, each time he used either pyrokinetics or destruction by itself, it wouldn't be able to match up to someone who could only use said power. But if he were to use his unique bloodline, which was a mix between the two, his attack would always come out on top. Unless of course the other would vastly overpower their own attack. Due to being lost in his thoughts, he missed Azazel forming another light spear, this one much more powerful than the others he had made, and threw it towards him. His danger senses screamed at him, and in the last second he was able to defend himself as his arm shot out and he grabbed the spear with his own hands. Ignoring the burning sensation, he spun around, spear still in his hand, before releasing it right back at the fallen, who widened his eyes at the unexpected move. Dodging, Azazel watched as his own spear flew past him and luckily didn't hit any of his own man. Looking back, he allowed a small smirk to show as he noticed Naruto's slightly trembling hand. Despite him being a phoenix with high regeneration, holy energy would still hurt them, which was one of the reason he was so surprised by his counter. Noticing Azazel's smirk, Naruto surprised the man as he brought his other hand up and lit it aflame before severing his damaged hand. He didn't even as much as twitch as he focused his attention on Azazel's surprised expression as a new hand formed within seconds. Giving it a test, he nodded satisfied as he could feel no more holy energy inside of him. Oh my, you sure are full of surprises, aren't you, Naruto-san? To take advantage of your advanced healing and do something no other devil would have done. Of course, you think something as insignificant as that would stop me. Don't be ridiculous, I haven't even gotten serious yet. To show he was not lying, he flared his power, causing numerous heads to turn into their direction at the oppressive aura that washed over the battlefield, if only for a few seconds. You still wish to continue? Naruto asked the older man. Azazel nodded. Despite not showing it, he was slightly nervous. That brief flare of power was enough for him to know that when it comes down to pure reserves, Naruto's were already larger than his own. Something that was quite concerning given that he was older by several millennia. He hoped that his years of experience could make up for the gap in power. Very well then, it seems I will have to show why despite my young age they already fear me. Naruto chuckled darkly as he stared at the broken and bleeding form of Azazel, who was laying on the ground in front of him, breathing heavily. Satisfied? Naruto asked mockingly as he looked at the man's violet eyes which stared at him with poorly concealed fear. Below him Azazel nodded weakly before coughing up more blood. Never in his life had he imagined himself being so outclassed. He was the leader of their faction, yet a boy barely in his hundreds had utterly destroyed him. How, even with all the information he had on him, information which he thought would have prepared him, perhaps even give him the upper hand, he still had lost the moment Naruto had gotten serious. As he stared up at what would appear to be his executioner, Azazel couldn't help but lay the blame at himself. The blame of participating in the war. I wish I could feel a woman for one last time, were Azazel's thoughts as he could feel the temperature around him rising. No doubt for whatever he would use to finish him with, and closed his eyes. Only for nothing to happen. Slowly he opened his eyes and looked up to see Naruto's arm being stopped by none other than Sirzechs himself. While any other time he would have questioned what went through the crimson-haired man's head, he decided to keep quiet this time. Enough, Naruto. We're being called back, Sirzechs said. Naruto glanced at his friend from the corner of his eye before smirking lightly as he lit his entire arm aflame. Sirzechs only narrowed his eyes as he coated his arm in the power of destruction and increasing the grip he had on his arm. Eventually what for Azazel felt was an eternity, Naruto stopped and allowed Sirzechs to lower his arm. Very well, he looked down at Azazel, his eyes flashing between blue and red before he looked away. Till next time, he said way too cheery to the crow below before he kicked off. Why? Azazel asked once only Sirzechs was left. The man said nothing for a moment before reaching in his pocket and retrieving a small vial. Here, I take it you know what these are. Azazel reached up and took the vial from his hand before bringing it to his mouth and downed it. Immediately he felt his wounds close up and was good to go aside from the small amount of blood he lost. It would do nobody any good if someone like you were taken out this early in the war. Don't mistake this as us being friends or anything. I only did it for Naruto. Having said, his peace wings sprouted out of Sirzechs' back before he too left. Azazel stood there for a little bit longer, all by himself before slowly he began to chuckle. Naruto Bale, you truly are a monster, he said to himself as his eyes were focused on a different vial he was holding. This one held a couple of droplets of blood Azazel had managed to get during their fight. He was going to use it to see what it was that made a monster such as him. There should be no way he should have been so out of his league during their fight. Him who could fight ultimate class devils with ease. Him who held 12 wings and lead an entire faction by himself. After a while he stopped laughing and spared the vial one last glance before pocketing it away safely. 6 pairs of wings came into existence as he headed towards their HQ. Arriving back at their camp, people parted as they noticed both the expression of annoyance he held along with the aura that surrounding him which promised pain for anyone who would attempt to speak with him. Naruto scowled as he grumbled underneath his breath. This close, he was this close. He clenched his fist. Fucking Sirzechs interrupting him just as he was about to erase the crow from existence. Why did he stop him? Wasn't killing your enemy the point of war? Ah, he suddenly yelled in frustration before expelling a ring of fire from his body. He was sure people would have cheered for him had he actually finished him off. After all, Azazel is the strongest fallen angel and removing him from the board would have been a major blow to the point that they might have even retreated or even withdraw themselves in fear of more higher-ranked members dying. Where's my tent? Naruto asked, or rather demanded, as he addressed one of the more important-looking people that he could see. It's over there. The man stammered slightly as his red eyes seemed to bore into his own before pointing to a small group of tents set up together. It's the second one on the right. Naruto grumbled some sort of thanks as he moved towards his tent. Entering, he immediately walked up to the futon that was there and allowed himself to fall down. the blood on his clothes and hands having gotten rid of during his little fight with Azazel. His clothes were still dirty however, something he didn't care about as he relaxed on the soft futon. Not long after he had laid down, the sound of footsteps alerted him of someone entering his tent. Opening a single eye, his annoyance returned full force as he saw it was Sirzechs that had entered. Catching him off guard, Naruto shot up from the futon before landing a haymaker right on Sirzechs' right cheek, sending the crimson-haired man flying out of his tent and coming to a stop several dozen feet away. "Ah, Naruto," Sirzechs greeted as blood leaked down the side of his mouth before he slowly got up, wincing at the throbbing pain he felt from the hit. Seeing Sirzechs flying out of the tent gained the attention of several devils that were there, including Ajuka and Seraphal, who came to see what it was about but didn't interfere. "Tell me, why did you stop me from finishing him off?" "I already stop lying to me," he interrupted him as the temperature in the area seemed to rise in response to his outburst. "I was this close." He held his index and thumb a centimeter away from touching. "Just one more attack and he would have been done, and we would have gotten rid of one of the bigger threats in this war." He leveled him a glare. "So tell me, why did you stop me from killing Azazel?" At the mention of the Azazel's name, several devils muttered amongst themselves. Especially at the fact that Naruto was implying he could have killed the man if Sirzechs hadn't stopped him. Some looked at him with respect as Azazel was definitely not a pushover. The man had several millennia of experience and 12 wings, indicating that he was ultimate class if using devil ranks. Aside from that, they all knew that Azazel was capable of fighting ultimate class devils with ease. Using holy energy, every fallen and angel had, which was a massive weakness to any devil regardless of their strength, something Naruto had first-hand experience with. Not going to answer, Naruto asked him before nodding to himself. "I see, I'm heading back to my tent. Don't bother me or else." He leveled everyone present with a glare which promised pain before he swiftly turned around and walked back to his tent, not sparing anyone a second glance. The rest of his day went by without any interruptions. Nobody came by, not even his own family. Not that he minded that though, as it was quite nice to just relax and not worry about anything. Days went by as the three biblical factions continued to wage war against another. Unfortunately for Naruto, he wasn't able to fight against Azazel again, as the man would be present in a different area each time he headed out. Each faction suffered large losses, something that showed as more and more tents stayed empty each time they would return. It was getting kind of repetitive for Naruto, as each day he would get up, head out and kill off either fallen or angels depending on who he would run into, and made quick work of them before heading back. It was honestly boring him how easily he could kill. He also noticed his friends were concerned about him ever since his little clash with Sirzechs. They were getting quite unnerved at how casually he could kill and keep on going like nothing had happened. He shrugged off their concerns however, as he had no interest in any of that. A heavy blow was dealt to them, the devils, as news reached them that 2 of the Satans had been killed in battle. Rumors said that Michael, heaven's strongest after God himself, did it, but nothing was confirmed. Currently Naruto could be seen floating in the sky, casually incinerating a couple of 2-winged angels who were stupid enough to think they stood a chance against him. He however wasn't even paying any attention. For the past few days he was able to sense 2 enormous energy signatures, easily surpassing anything he had sensed in his life. What got his attention though was that they were getting closer and closer each day, to the point that weaker beings were already being affected by the power these 2 excluded. Now though, he felt it even stronger and couldn't help but feel his blood pumping through his veins. Whomever this was would be a true challenge for him. Not like that annoying crow Azazel who decided to stay away from him. No, someone with this amount of power was worthy of seeing him go all out. He only hoped they would get here fast, as he wasn't sure if he could wait or seek out this power himself. Rah! The fighting stopped temporarily as a loud roar gained everybody's attention. 2 dragons, each several dozen feet high, crashed into the battlefield. Each were several dozen feet in height and uncaring of those their massive bodies crushed as they fought against another. They didn't pay any attention to anyone aside from the other dragon as they radiated a massive amount of power. Slowly a large grin crept upon Naruto's lips as he easily recognized the 2. Drake and Albion, the 2 heavenly dragons capable of gods and satans if they wished. Naruto kept on watching as the 2 dragons lay waste to their surrounding and chuckled at the weak attempts of both angels and fallen as they sent lightning spears at the pair, which harmlessly bounced off of their scaled. Naruto. The sound of Sirzechs calling for him caused him to look away from the 2 beasts and gazed upon the man who, like him, looked unharmed. Amazing, huh? This is what I've been waiting for. This is the ultimate test. I doubt I will get another chance in my life to fight against either of those. He spoke with excitement dripping into his voice before looking at him. You're going to join in? Sirzechs looked at him before glancing at the 2 fighting dragons that continued to devastate the surroundings and nodding. Yes, I will, in order to make sure none of our men will be killed. If Naruto could smile any wider he would have as he heard that. Very well, I look forward to seeing you fully release your power. He held his fist out towards him. Sirzechs looked at the outstretched appendage before smiling and bumped against it with his own. Same here, my friend, same here. With that said, he watched as Naruto flew up high into the sky while he stayed on the ground. Both Sirzechs and Naruto closed their eyes and concentrated on the demonic energy. Then, without a warning, both their power exploded out of their body. The earth shook for miles and the fighting stopped as for the first time since the war both devils let loose their full power. Temperature rose to almost unbearable heights and slowly more and more members of each faction fell to their knees as a massive weight was suddenly dropped on their shoulders, accompanied by a tremendous amount of killer intent which could be felt for miles. Even the two heavenly dragons had stopped their fight as they were affected by their auras. The temperature continued to rise as up in the sky Naruto released more and more crimson flames out of his body, which went on for hundreds of feet in several directions to the point that it looked and felt like they were all in the presence of the sun itself. Suddenly the flames stopped expanding and instead withdrew themselves towards the owner Naruto, who by now could no longer be seen, as in his place was a ball of fire several dozen feet wide in diameter. Bale's famed power of destruction arched around it, and despite being high up in the air, the grass on the ground around him began to burn and the ground turned into lava. Down below on the ground, Sirzechs could no longer be seen either, as the power he released completely covered his form, and in his place was a beam of red energy that reached up high in the sky. A beacon much like Naruto, as the ground around him had cratered in several feet due to the immense pressure it was enduring. Slowly, just like Naruto, he called his power back to him but didn't weaken in the slightest. The beam got smaller and smaller to the point that it had fully receded into his own body. At that exact moment, the miniature sun above them exploded as both Naruto and Sirzechs showed everyone their transformed form. Human-shaped aura of destruction, secret art, complete transformation, Phoenix. Both exclaimed at the same time as their transformation was complete. High in the sky where Naruto used to be was now a being spoken of only in myths and legends themselves. Devils, angels, fallen, and even the two dragons looked at it in awe as they could feel the energy it was radiating surpassed any devil they had met before. It was a being made entirely out of crimson flames that flickered wildly yet controlled. Its majestic wings from left to right span over 100 feet in diameter and sparked with red lightning. The bird threw its head back before letting loose a loud shriek which could be heard for miles. Away from him, his father, Zekrom Bale, watched his son with pride visible in his eyes. Never in his wildest imagination he had thought his son would have been capable of doing something like this. Yes, he knew his son had a massive amount of energy which easily surpassed his own, but even he was shocked at just how much it exactly was. He had felt it when he and Sirzechs went all out and could easily tell it was several times higher than the current Lucifer, much to his and everyone's shock. He decided then and there that once the war is over he would let his son take over the clan from him. A safe distance away, Azazel too watched the transformation he had undergone and was a mix between fear and awe. Even when he had clashed with the younger man he had not shown this kind of power. Something he was quite glad for, as he knew he would not stand a chance, as even now the power he sensed was suffocating. Similar thoughts went through their minds as they averted their attention to Sirzechs, who by now could no longer be made out as a human, or rather a devil, as in his place was what appeared to be a being made completely out of destruction and floated a few inches above the ground. It made for a fearsome sight, as it looked like just floating energy which spread in all sorts of directions. On an unseen signal, Naruto flapped his wings before shooting towards both dragons, who were caught off guard by the speed he possessed and could do nothing but brace themselves as Naruto crashed into them. His unique bloodline managing to harm them as it destroyed their scales. Sirzechs watched as Naruto tackled the white dragon Albion into the ground, leaving Drake standing. Wasting no time, he moved. For everyone bar a few, he seemingly disappeared. The only sign he moved was the destroyed ground he stood on as he appeared a few feet away from the red dragon before unleashing a thick beam of destruction which flew towards Drake, who brought one of his wings in front of him to tank the blow. RGH. Drake grunted as, much like his rival, the attack managed to destroy his scales and harm him directly, much to his shock, as none other than Albion had managed to harm him. The surrounding supernatural beings quickly retreated to safety as the heavy weight that previously pressed them down had disappeared and allowed them to move. Both for not wanting to get flattened by either dragon and because they all knew that they stood no chance against either of the current fighters. Not to mention that they had noticed that Sirzechs' current form was lashing out wildly, showing that he wasn't completely in control of it. As the attack died down, Drake removed his wing before lashing out with his tail. Sirzechs quickly moved out of the way as the tail met the ground and subsequently shook the earth. Without any commands, several magic circles formed above the Crimson Dragon, each shooting down a concentrated beam of energy directly onto the dragon's back. Just as Drake was about to strike, he lost footing as the ground shook once more. Both glanced to the side where they could see Albion wrestling with the still transformed Naruto. Disengaging from his opponent, Naruto was about to fly up, only for Albion to lash out with his maw in an attempt to bite him. He was shocked, however, as instead of biting into something solid, his teeth went through his form, allowing Naruto to fly up. Shooting up in the sky, Naruto came to a stop as he could no longer see his opponent but still sense him. Circling a couple times, he released another loud shriek. Down below, both dragons and Sirzechs waited as they heard the shriek. Their attention was focused upwards towards the clouds, which began to glow much to their confusion. Then without any further warnings the clouds parted and they could see several balls of fire raining down towards them, each of them as big as Naruto's transformed state. Both dragons brought their wings up for cover whereas Sirzechs concentrated and a shield formed made purely out of destruction. Boom boom boom, the earth shook continuously for the next minute as the trio were bombarded as Naruto continued his assault. Eventually it stopped and an enormous dust cloud covered them. Those who had retreated could only watch on in awe at the battle currently taking place. Monster, that's what Sirzechs and Naruto were as they looked at the two devils fighting against two beings that could lay waste to gods. Then again after their show of power some thought that if they wanted to both Sirzechs and Naruto were more than a match against several gods. Coming down Naruto watched as his attack had left several deep craters in the surrounding area. He noticed Sirzechs was alright while both dragons sported several scorch marks. Strong, the voice of Drake boomed through the battlefield. You two are by far the strongest devils alive. I can't remember the last time someone other than Albion has been able to hurt me. Indeed, but I can tell you aren't used to that former you. Albion spoke to Naruto, most likely due to this being your first time transforming in battle. Naruto casually flapped his wings before he replied. You are indeed correct. I just wanted to see what my limits are as I have no interest in those fodder. He referred to the angels and fallen he had been fighting. I haven't felt so alive in a long time. The thrill of knowing that I could potentially die, he flared his power. I missed it. He began releasing more and more power as flames rose above him and focused on a concentrated point before it began to form a small ball which grew at an extremely fast rate. This will be it. My last attack before my transformation will die down. The miniature sun above him grew bigger and bigger as he pumped more power into it to the point that it was already several times larger than he himself was. Sirzechs upon noticing Naruto's attack wisely retreated as he too felt like he was about to lose his current transformation and quickly blitzed to safety several miles away before slowly returning to his normal state and fell to his knees, panting hard. While he regained his breath he kept his eyes on the still expanding sun and could feel the increase in temperature even at the distance he was now and quickly put up a barrier in front of him. Finally Naruto stopped feeding more energy to his attack which by now was a couple dozen times larger than himself and looked down at both dragons. This is the end, he yelled out before flying away from underneath the small sun he created. Supernova. As his attack descended Naruto flapped his wings as he quickly got as far away as he could. Halfway during his flight the flames dissipated and showed a battered Naruto who was unconscious and only clad in pants. His transformation having burned away any other article of clothing he wore. As he crashed into the ground miles away he was unable to see what happened next as hundreds of barriers popped up in existence. Behind him they all watched the enormous ball of fire go lower and lower until eventually it made contact with both dragons. And the world was bathed in light. So soft, Naruto thought as he found himself waking up. His eyes were kept closed as he shuffled around, only to bite his tongue as he could feel every muscle in his body screaming in pain. Taking a deep breath he opened his eyes only to immediately close them as he stared straight into light that was too bright for his eyes. HNNG, he couldn't help but let out a soft groan as he moved around so he was a bit more comfortable. You're awake, a feminine voice suddenly spoke up. Not having expected somebody else was here with him his body jolted only for him to suck in a deep breath at the sudden movement. Ah, please don't move, the same voice spoke. It was much softer this time. He felt two soft hands touch his chest before slowly the pain disappeared. Much to his surprise. Thank you, he said softly as he slowly turned his head and opened his eyes. Beautiful, was the first thing he said before quickly closing his mouth as she blushed, making her appear even cuter. The person helping him had long pink hair tied up in twintails that reached to the middle of her back. Pale skin and two large golden eyes which stared right back at him with an emotion he hadn't seen in a long time. Yukai, Naruto asked himself as he noticed she had two orange fox ears on the top of her head along with a single thick, orange bushy tail behind her. She wore an interesting looking outfit, one he had never seen before but found that it really looked good on her. It was a blue mini skirt type of clothing along with what appeared to be blue thigh-length stockings and arm guards or something like it. Where am I and who are you if you don't mind me asking? He asked her politely after he finished looking her over. You are currently in Takamagahara. She watched his eyes widen after a moment, no doubt realizing where he exactly was. And my name is Tamamo. Tamamo no Me, Goshujin-sama. She spoke cheerfully which was accompanied by a beautiful smile and he couldn't help but blush slightly much to his shock before raising an eyebrow at how she addressed him. Naruto replied as he received his answer. Goshujin-sama, he knew exactly what it meant but not why she was calling him that. As far as he's aware this is the first time meeting someone like her. After all, he was sure he would remember someone as pretty as her. Suddenly Tamamo stood up, giving him a better view of her outfit and noticed that she didn't mind how he was looking at her. In fact she seemed quite happy. Please stay here Goshujin-sama while I will tell the person who brought you here you awake. She spoke sweetly yet there was this underlying tone to it which caused him to nod. Great, she chirped as she clapped her hands together before she twirled around and walked towards the door. His eyes unconsciously lingering on her behind, though he did take notice that she was walking on black okobo, which could still be heard even as she had left the room. So, you're the person little Tamamo-chan is all smitten with. A soft, feminine voice spoke up, causing his head snap to the right in the direction the voice came from. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at the woman who stood in the doorway, staring right back at him. The first thing he took notice of were the woman's eyes. They were bright yellow golden, even like he was looking at the sun, and filled with warmth directed towards him. Long raven-colored hair held up in a bun with a couple strands running down the side of her face. She wore an expensive and beautiful black kimono which hugged her body and emphasized her pale skin, which held an otherworldly shine to it. Naruto wasn't sure who she was, but she held an aura around her that told him she was quite important. He spotted Tamamo standing a couple steps behind her, her head bowed down slightly. Actually, scratch that, he had somewhat of an idea who the woman standing there was due to Tamamo informing him he was currently in Takamagahara. But that made him wonder why. Why was he here, or rather why did she bring him here? And how long has he been here for? Calm yourself. The woman spoke up once more, and he did what she told him. Closing his eyes, he took a few deep yet calming breaths before opening them. Good. I welcome you, Naruto Bale. I'm sure you know who I am, but I will introduce myself nonetheless. The woman said as she straightened herself a little. I am Amaterasu Omakami, Shinto goddess of the sun. Behind me is my personal handmaiden Tamamo no Mei, but she already introduced herself. Ah, nice you meet you Amaterasu, Sama. He added the suffix after thinking about it while not showing any shock for being in the presence of a goddess. Much to his surprise, the sun goddess merely waved her hand. Please, there's no need for that, Amaterasu is just fine. She smiled at him, which he returned. Alright then Amaterasu, can you tell me why I am here? Not that I don't like it, but last thing I remember was having one hell of a time with those two lizards, and now I'm, well, here. Both Amaterasu and Tamamo had a drop of sweat going down the back of their head as they listened how casually he spoke about both heavenly dragons, beings that were stronger than she herself was. Of course, I brought you here upon Tamamo-chan's request. Seeing the questioning look sent her way, she continued. You didn't think the enormous amount of power that was released by both yourself and Sirzechs went unnoticed, did you? I'm sure every pantheon, from Norse to Egyptian, had felt your power. Tamamo certainly did, and she almost begged to watch what was happening once she sensed your power. Imagine both our surprise when we watched two transformed devils fighting against the heavenly dragons which are capable of burning pantheons to ashes. I see, but how did you watch? I'm sure I would have sensed your presence. Oh, we watched from afar. Here, in this temple to be exact. Us Shinto gods want a part in your three-way war, and so does any other. I understand, Naruto said as she finished speaking. How couldn't he? The war had nothing to do with them, as it was something between Lucifer and God himself as far as he understood. It would only bring the wrath of other factions if they were to partake, or even worse, support a side. But what about Tamamo? The way she addresses me speaks of familiarity, but as much as I try I can't for the life of me remember her. He sent an apologetic look to the pink-haired fox girl, who frowned for a second before it was gone. Tamamo and Amaterasu exchanged glances before the latter nodded her head and stepped aside, allowing the former to walk up to him. Do you not remember me, Goshujin-sama? Tamamo tilted her head as her fox ears twitched in response. Naruto had to fight the urge to call her out on her cuteness as to not ruin his imagine. Moo. She brought one of her hands up and scratched her cheek. Do you not remember saving me several decades ago? Naruto furrowed his eyebrows in thought. He did recall saving a young girl several years ago, back when he was on one of his casual trips to the human world shortly after his mother had died. It was a young girl who was hunted, or at least it appeared to be as such, as he could remember seeing tears running down her cheeks and the fear in her eyes. She was chased by what seemed like thousands of soldiers. His eyes darkened a little, which didn't went unnoticed by the others in the room. It was the start of his descent into darkness. The death of his mother had dealt a massive blow to himself as a person, and seeing those thousands of soldiers attempting to kill a single girl was enough of a reason to vent his anger. It was known as a massacre throughout feudal Japan, as that night over 5,000 soldiers along with several miles of land had been wiped out from existence. You do remember. Tamamo's soft voice brought him out of his memories that belonged to a darker time. Yes, I do. It's just that back then the girl I saved didn't have a tail nor fox ears, or at least I didn't notice. He said as he chuckled lightly. So that's why you're so affectionate. Because I saved your life. His answer was a nod from the fox girl, who had moved closer as she sat down near the foot of the bed. But how did you end up here? He looked at Amaterasu, who smiled softly at him, thankful that he had saved her, for she was too late. She ended up here because she called out to me. That night, when she was hunted, she prayed for someone to come and save her. It was impressive for me to hear a plea from a yukai, as usually it's Inari who handles them. Unfortunately, I received her plea too late, as when I arrived it was already over and I found Tamamo sitting in a field by herself, crying. Despite that, I introduced myself to her and asked if she wished to go with me. An offer which she graciously accepted, despite the tears that were staining her cheeks. Amaterasu couldn't help but say. Naruto turned to Tamamo to ask if what she said was true, but was caught off guard as he noticed her staring at him and the intense emotions he could spot in her big, amber-colored eyes. He found himself naked underneath her gaze and quickly looked away, making her frown as she wondered if she did something wrong. What is happening to me? Naruto questioned himself. I never felt like this before. It usually was him that made women felt so self-aware, and it was a new experience for him. Remembering something important, he snapped out of those thoughts and turned to Amaterasu, who looked amused at their little interaction, if her smirk was anything to go by. Say, Amaterasu, is the war still going on? If so, I need to return and help. I mean, I'm quite imp. Please calm down, Naruto-kun, she said as she noticed the frown Tamamo held upon him, mentioning leaving them, or more importantly her. The war ended shortly after I brought you here, after God died. Silence reigned the room as she watched his expression shift into one of disbelief. What? Did you just say that God is dead? He ignored the wince upon the mention of the biblical God. But how? I mean, I'm not sure myself. From what I managed to understand, however, is that he had participated in the war, tired from sealing away Sirzechs. It took out a lot of him, and so he fought in a weakened state. I see. Who killed him? He asked her after a moment of silence. I don't know. Rumors are that Lucifer struck him down while receiving fatal wounds as well. Naruto closed his eyes. That was big news, as with the death of God, angels no longer were the strongest amongst the biblical three, especially since from participating himself he had seen several angels fall. A part of him felt sad though, as now he would never have an opportunity to fight against the man himself. While he knew that God at his best outclassed him several times, it would probably be an interesting fight, especially after the fun he had with the two dragons. Speaking of which, what happened to the heavenly dragons? I mean, I passed out and I doubt I did any lasting damage. Here Amaterasu smiled. Well, after you passed out and were brought here, God appeared on the battlefield and sealed both of them in sacred gears despite his exhausted state, and are now waiting till they appear inside a human. I should warn you though, Naruto-kun, that it was because of you God managed to seal them away without any issues, as they were caught off guard. So you should keep an eye out for when either Drake or Albion are reborn, as I doubt they are happy they are now sealed away. I understand. I doubt, however, any human would be a problem for me. Don't be arrogant, she chided. Each Longinus, if mastered to such a degree, is capable of killing gods. It's safe to say both Drake and Albion, with how strong they are both classified as Longinus. Amaterasu released a soft sigh before she smiled as she saw him taking her words serious. Now that we're done with that, what do you want to do now? Do you want to leave or stay here? You are free to stay here for as long as you want. Naruto hummed as he thought it over. Honestly, he liked it here. Despite being unconscious for who knows how long, it's the first time he had no nightmares when asleep, something he wrote off as being due to the calming aura he could feel from both Amaterasu and Tamamo. It truly made a difference, as unknown to anyone but himself. One of the reasons he was looking for strong opponents was so that there was a chance that he could meet his end. A chance for him to be reunited with his mother, the person he loved the most and whose death kickstarted a dark era in his life. He doubted even Sirzechs would be capable of killing him, especially with his ridiculously high regeneration even compared to other members of the Phoenix family. Those dragons, Drake and Albion, if Sirius would have been able to kill him if they would have fought him serious. It was an opportunity he couldn't let pass, as it would simultaneously sate his lust for battle. But now, when in company of Tamamo, he felt himself at ease. There was no longer a voice whispering in his head, telling him to kill or destroy any that stood in his way. She had an aura that reminded him of his mother, the one person who could get him to drop his guard. In the beginning, a part of him was afraid though. Afraid of what she would do to him, but a look into those eyes of her eased his fears, as there was no doubt she would never try anything. Not with the amount of adoration present in her amber orbs for him and only him. Tamamo looked at him with hope-filled eyes which he tried his hardest to ignore, as he instead locked eyes with the goddess. I would like to stay here for a while if possible, both to heal myself back to perfect and to spend some time with Tamamo. He mumbled the last part to himself, but it was still heard by both women. Yes, Tamamo chirped. Thank you, Goshujin-sama. Quicker than he expected, Tamamo had moved closer to him and he felt her arms wrap around him in a warm embrace. Naruto closed his eyes, basking in the warmth her body gave off. A small smile unseen to anyone but Amaterasu formed as he enjoyed the embrace he was receiving. The first one is several decades. From her position, Amaterasu watched the two with a smile. She felt happy for Tamamo, who she had come to see as her own daughter, so joyful with the person she had fallen for those years ago. A person who even she wasn't aware of. Tamamo had her fair share of suitors, each of whom were interested in her beauty and wished for her hand in marriage from different pantheons. Each of which she had kindly rejected, for she had her heart set on someone else. Despite some being more persistent than others. Luckily for her, she was under Amaterasu's protection, who as one of the strongest gods made sure they wouldn't attempt anything to her lest they wish her wrath upon them. After all, her domain over the sun surpassed that of Apollo, the Greek god, who too held a portion of control over the celestial body, by a very large margin. Looking at Naruto, she saw that he still held his small smile and his eyes still closed. He did have a single arm wrapped around her in return, and while she wasn't an empath, she could practically feel the happiness radiating from Tamamo, who seemed to be trying to meld their bodies together. Not wanting to let him go. Well, I'm taking my leave while informing your father that you are in good hands. Tamamo will keep you company, I doubt she minds that one bit. Receiving no reply, she silently left the room, leaving the two by themselves as she went and prepared a message for Lord Bale and tell him his son is alive and well. It wouldn't spell anything good for them if they would keep him away. Once Amaterasu left the room, Naruto opened his eyes and glanced downwards, looking at the top of her head where her orange fox ears rested. Tamamo, he called out her name softly, only to not receive any reply. Focusing on her, he noticed her breathing had slowed down as her face was resting against his chest. Surprisingly, she still had her arms locked behind his back as he realized she had fallen asleep. Most likely due to all that had happened and the overload of emotions that happened in such a short time. Carefully and with a smile, he leaned back until he was laying in bed with her asleep on his chest. Her single thick, bushy tail had stopped swaying in happiness and was resting to the side of them. Giving one last look at the peaceful and happy smile she wore, he slowly closed his eyes as he too drifted off to sleep. He wondered if this was going to be a new chapter in his life. One he won't have to go through by himself. Bleary, amber eyes slowly fluttered open as Tamamo woke up, feeling more refreshed than she had in a while. Sitting up, Tamamo yawned as she stretched out her arms above her head. Mwah! She lowered her hands and rubbed her still drowsy eyes. HNNG, the sound of a male groaning got her attention as she immediately lost any traces of sleep she previously held before she shuffled back and gazed downwards, and her expression quickly changing. She still held her shock, but it was mixed with a high amount of adoration as she stared at the sleeping form of Naruto. Her cheeks flushed the longer she stared before realizing what was going on, and her flush increased in intensity. She had fallen asleep on top of Naruto, her Goshujin-sama. Tamamo clasped her hands together and held them in front of her chest in an attempt to calm her rapidly beating heart. However, instead of calming her heartbeat, it only increased as slowly he opened his eyes and his cerulean blue staring into her amber. Tamamo felt her heart was about to burst as he sent her a small smile. Morning, Tamamo, he greeted the fox girl, who by now was hugging her bushy-looking tail. Morning, Goshujin-sama, she responded to his greeting with a slight stammer. Hope you had a good night's sleep. Soft chuckle escaped his throat as he saw her cheeks flush, no doubt due to her having fallen asleep on top of him. Not that he minded, however. I did. It was the best night's sleep I had in a long time, all because of you. He flashed her another smile. Thank you. Ah, no problem, Goshujin-sama. I enjoyed it as well, she said softly before looking away while increasing her grip on her own tail. She didn't seem bothered by it though, so he didn't comment on it. However, Tamamo, the girl looked back in direction upon hearing him call her name. Please stop with the Goshujin-sama crap. Call me by my name if you will. I would like that. Oh okay, Naruto-sama. A radiant smile formed on Tamamo's face upon speaking his name. Despite his attempt, Naruto couldn't help but return her smile as he watched the cheerful fox girl, who was utterly infatuated with him, and while only having spoken a few words with her, she already held a large place in his heart. For she was so bright and happy, it reminded him how he used to be before the death of his mother, and a part of him wanted to see more of her like this. Neither knew what caused it or how it happened, as one moment they were smiling at another and next thing they knew was that Naruto had pulled her in a sudden embrace. Tamamo felt her cheeks heat up as she returned the embrace with all her body. Her eyes closing as she breathed in his scent. Her tail came up from behind her before it moved towards him and coiled around both of them, pressing them further against each other. Feeling Tamamo shuffle in his grasp, he spoke up with a voice heavily laced with emotion which caught her off guard. See, can we stay like this for a while? This feels really nice, and he stopped speaking as he felt Tamamo's arms wrap around his back once more, this time with more pressure that did nothing but calm his mind. It's okay, Naruto-sama, I know you had a hard time, but I am here to help you. Eventually, due to the arrival of Amaterasu, the two disengaged from their embrace, though they kept their close proximity much to Tamamo's happiness, as she was going to do her best to help him. Especially now that she found out that he's much more troubled than she thought. Though it was also nice for him to allow her to see this side of him. A side where he is much more vulnerable, and she understood that he already trusted her enough to pause his usual behavior of acting like nothing could bother him. Say, is there anything for me to wear? He asked Tamamo, who turned to him and looked to see he was only wearing a plain short-sleeved shirt and underwear. Blushing, Tamamo ran out the room before returning not even a minute later, this time with a beautiful and expensive-looking kimono which she handed over. There you go, Naruto-sama, it looks very good on you. He heard her compliment him as she looked him over. Thank you Tamamo, let's head out, Don't want to keep Amaterasu waiting. He gestured for her to take the lead as he had no idea which direction they were supposed to be heading. Amaterasu watched, a pleased smile on her face as Naruto was opening up more to Tamamo, who sat as close as she could next to him. He, you are quite funny Naruto-sama. Tamamo giggled. That was something she had noticed as well. Instead of Goshujin-sama, Tamamo was now calling him by his name. Something he was pleased with, she could tell, as no doubt being addressed as Goshujin-sama was not up to his liking. She herself could see where he was coming from. After all, she had told him to drop the sama suffix after her name the moment he used it. Millennia of being addressed so respectful got annoying quite fast. The only ones required to address her in a respectful manner were the gods from other pantheons, as she would not take any disrespect from them. She had to stand her ground, or else the other gods would never take her or her threats seriously. Naruto-kun, Amaterasu called as he turned his attention from Tamamo to her. Upon noticing he was looking at her, she continued. I've sent a message to your father, Zekrom Bale, in which I stated that you are in good hands and will be staying here for an undisclosed amount of time. Thank you. He gave a slight bow towards her before he was nudged from his side. Yes Tamamo, he asked, only to come face to face with a small piece of fish held together by a pair of chopsticks mere centimeters from his face. Raising an eyebrow, he glanced at Tamamo, who nodded with a smile as she nudged them closer to his mouth. Rolling his eyes, he nonetheless parted his lips, allowing her to feed him, which she immediately did. She looked at him expectantly as she watched him chew his food. He swallowed before opening his mouth, and Tamamo took it as a sign to continue feeding him, which she did with great delight. Off to the side, Amaterasu shook her head as she watched their interaction, amused at how quickly Tamamo was pleased when it came to Naruto. But she wouldn't interrupt or stop either of them. It was obvious to her Tamamo did this on her own accord. If he had forced her or anything of such nature, it would be different. But she could see with her own eyes that they were good for another. Tamamo, who seemed to do anything to make him happy. And Naruto, who could use somebody like her in his life. Even if only to keep him from succumbing to darkness, which would spell nothing good for anyone, be they devil or angel. The sound of a chair being moved got both their attention as they turned to Amaterasu, who merely waved at them. Don't bother me, I have to attend my duty that comes with being Omikami of Japan. Once you two are done, ask Tamamo to give you a tour of the place. I'm sure she'd love to. She sent the fox girl a wink. If you need anything, I will be located in my office. Once more ask Tamamo for that. With that, the supreme goddess left the room and Tamamo quickly went back to feeding her self-appointed master. Days flew by as for Naruto as he slowly but surely regained his lost power. It was quite interesting really, how supernatural bodies worked. One could literally fight for hours, some even for days, and with a little rest they would be back to normal. But, if one would use up all their energy, be it demonic or holy, it would replenish slowly. Very slowly, which Naruto found out, as never before had he used up all of his demonic energy, especially since he didn't exactly know how much he had. So even now, after several days if not weeks, he could feel his energy slowly returning. Though Tamamo tried to help by channeling small amounts chakra into his body, and much to the surprise of everyone, even Amaterasu, it worked as slowly his body began accepting the different energy. It helped that it made both even closer than before, to the point that the only time she wasn't nearby was when he went to sleep. Even that had changed as he had caught her sneaking in his bed at night. He didn't mind it though, as it was nice to wake up next to somebody, not to mention that her body was quite warm as she would snuggle into him. So all in all, he had gotten more familiar with the fox girl who was in love with him. He didn't do anything else though, as despite all of that they still had known each other less than a month, regardless of whether that single month had been the best one in decades. He had told Amaterasu that as well as he knew she was trying to get them together, something what would probably happen regardless of her interference, as she was everything he looked for in a woman that he could love. The only thing that would be a problem would be his father, the elders, and his status as heir to the Bale clan. Meh, he cared little what they would think. They had neither the power nor the audacity to attempt anything. Last time they tried to set him up with some devil woman he never heard of. Unknown to Naruto, however, was that while he was relaxing, his body and mind calming while being attended by a cute and beautiful young fox girl who seemed to be close to worshipping him, the underworld was the complete opposite. But he didn't and wouldn't know about that for a while.